Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Forward Thinking. It's Charlie and Chrissy here. So today we're going to talk about customer experience. And I'm going to be asking Chrissy some questions. And we're really going to be focusing on how to not make it turn into a mess, descend into chaos, confuse our prospects and our customers, and really gain control over the messaging that's going out there and make sure that it's consistent and presented in the right way. It can be a real differentiator for a company that can just come across like they've got their shit together, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the opposite can have a very detrimental effect on your business if you are really sending out mixed messages to people and you don't have a consistent and cohesive experience for them. So should we just jump right into it?
Yeah.
Because I think you've got three primary things to focus on. So you want to kick off the first one?
Yep. So customer experience, customer journey, whatever you want to call it, that's what we're focusing on. And I think just to start, more than ever, that is so important. And as we start to market to people, instead of just thinking about how we market to just like an account or a customer, we need to ensure that whatever journey that, prospect or customer is on really, makes sense and um it could really impact like how they buy, and especially with all these freemium models or product led go to market strategies, it makes that whole journey even more important and having that cleared up. So the first thing is it needs ownership. So many times I see that there's no one really looking at the customer journey. All of the marketing teams are kind of focused on different areas and building their strategy for those goals, but they're not thinking about how does this fit into the big picture. But that can cause some problems, especially when their goals or the strategy they're putting in place are confusing across the board or have a lot of activity that then can make the buyer annoyed or just have a really friction experience, like opposite of frictionless, really just wrong,
Can you give
something.
an example of, not a specific example, don't throw anyone under the bus, but kind of a high level example of how it could go wrong?
Oh yeah. I mean, a perfect kind of classic example is someone signs up for like your product, like a freemium version of your product. A lot of the times there's different teams thinking about what you do once that happen, and they have their own strategy for that. So a marketing team, demand gen team might think, oh, I need to create this onboarding nurture. The sales team says, oh, that person could be ready to buy. They're from my target account. I'm going to start putting them into an outreach sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the app itself, you might also have messages that get sent out to the person, or even, chat bots that are trying to engage with them, or even emails from customer success that maybe you don't even know about because they think of these people as really like product users and customers.
And then
That's
maybe
so
even, they just go into your total marketable database and they're getting picked up by just a random campaign every week, right?
that too. Yeah. So the if you think about it, that's a lot of messages and a lot of different people reaching out to them. And from a prospect perspective, they could have barely done anything in your product so far, but they have all these conflicting messages on what to do next. And no team wins at that point. So I think having someone who can really take ownership of that whole experience, a lot of companies don't have a headcount dedicated toward this, but I think they do. Or
Or they do
marketing,
need one.
they do need one. Yeah. And I think that person maybe for now can naturally live under the marketing ops team, because the marketing ops team is the one team that supports all of the revenue function. And this person actually does need to work cross-functionally with the whole revenue function,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the whole prospect and customer journey. It's not just demand gen activities. It's not just, what gets sent out of your marketing automation platform. It's everything and all those tools. And the marketing ops team is the one team that's experienced supporting all of them.
Yep.
So having just even one person to do this, and I mean that because it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of alignment. And this person can really be the architect and make sure that everything makes sense. And I'll give an analogy on this of why it's important, or a real life example. I'm obsessed with the show Top Chef, and they'll do this episode called Restaurant Wars, where they take up, 5 contestants. Granted, they're all competing against each other, but they have to then join a team and then come up with a cohesive menu. And you'll see that the teams that have, from the start, a strategy and figure out, okay, this is going to be our plan. This is how our meal works together. All of it is, based on each other. And people will even, put their own like way of cooking aside so they can win the competition. But then if you see other teams where maybe they're just thinking about themselves, they're just playing to their own strengths because they know, well, if I don't screw up, the rest of the team could, but if I don't screw up, I won't get kicked off. Then those teams are at the bottom because their whole meal made no sense, and this is what I'm trying to say here is, yes, a team can maybe have their own winning strategy on its own, but we need to think about how that fits into the whole picture, because the whole team needs to win to actually, get a customer and make that customer happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that analogy.
So the second thing is, where should you start? Like once you've set ownership, where should you start? And maybe you don't have one person that sets ownership, but maybe it's like a collective of people that have decided to say, okay, we're going to own this. Where do you start? And that can be actually kind of a fun thing if it is a collective of people, because then they kind of really understand those different parts of the buyer journey and can speak to that. But the first thing is map the experience to the customer's expectations. So we talk about this a lot, the golden rule of marketing: market to others as you would be marketed to. Have empathy for your prospect customer. How would they want to be marketed to? And a lot of the times we think about persona-based marketing. Okay, this person's title means that they're going to have this different, whatever. That helps in some cases, especially if they're maybe buying a different product, but really it should be based on behavior. Where did this person come from? What did the person do? That can change what their customer journey is like even more, because that's more indicating of what their expectation. If someone's a cold lead, they don't expect to go into your nurture. They don't want to just get bombarded with emails that assume they know who you are. They want maybe some other, messaging from sales to tell them, this is why you should care about us. Or is this your pain point? Yes, you should, I want you to know about this. And so, but for someone who has engaged with you, downloaded your content, or said that they want to subscribe to your newsletter, of course they want to receive your emails, and they can go down that path, and that matches what they're expecting. And that means that they're going to continue to engage with your company.
Yeah, I think the equation that we like to talk about that I think fits here is happiness is reality minus expectations. So
yeah,
say they're expecting a 10 and you deliver them a 5, 5 minus 10 is a -5. So, try and think about what they're expecting and either match that or beat it, right? And the cold data thing is perfect, right? Like if someone's not expecting to get a random email from you, then the reality of receiving that random email from you, while maybe they've just dropped off their kid at daycare crying and they're a bit stressed out. That may or may not be happening to us right now. And then you get that email, they're just going to unsubscribe, right? They're going to just be annoyed by it.
Yeah.
Or they're not expecting to get that phone call from sales, at that time, and then they do. Or they do sign up for your product and they literally just want to try it out, and then they just get absolutely inundated with just lots of different, like you said, the messages in the product, the email messages. Then they get invited to 3 different webinars a week, and they've been automatically subscribed to the newsletter, all of this stuff, and they're just like, oh my god, I'm overwhelmed by this. All I want to do is just try this product for a day. Quick way to unsubscribe there. So think about the reality minus expectations, and don't go below the 0, right?
Yeah. And I think if you are mapping this out, I think it's good to think about what are the goals along that experience that you want that person to do, and then reverse engineer all the way from the beginning of these are all the entry points of people of how they would interact with us. How do we then send them on a path that will help us meet these goals, and then go to the next one? And this may take a while, but starting with like your main ones, like your main sources, someone who comes through your website from a demo, someone who downloads piece of content, or someone who, is just showing intent, or is the account you're going after, but might be a cold lead. Start with the basics and go down from there. But doing this whole exercise will really give you a strategy too of what you should do.
Yeah. And if you think about it, just fundamentally, right? We're all in marketing automation, and this is what marketing automation was born to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like segmentation, sending the right message to the right person, automating that. But many companies aren't really even automating anything. It's just like, okay, like get this email,
Batch.
create it, send it to all these people,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like, let's actually kind of try and live the promise of what marketing automation is in a smart way,
Mm-hmm.
to really guide the experience. And it's not that hard to do it in the tools. You can segment your database based on different intent variables, like what are they signing up for, or what are they doing, or what are they looking like they're interested in. Then of course we mentioned person information. You can do that too, and you can really create a good experience for the people in your database. I think that's the key part. There are people in your database. They're not just like a lead. They're not a number. Whenever you do anything that is like sending an email or a call or any kind of marketing, like there's a human being on the other side of that screen seeing that, and you want it to make sense. And
think about those people in your database are your friends.
Right.
Like would
you treat
would
them
you just like bombard them with a bunch of emails, and then if you found out that also then maybe your dad and your mom was also messaging at the same time, wouldn't that be weird? Wouldn't you want to know about that? Or
maybe that's a top tip. You should add all of your friends and family into the database and then get them to text you when things get annoying.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's a really good idea.
If anyone tries that, let me know.
But yeah,
do it with their consent, of course.
Yeah.
You don't want them to sue you.
That's
like
a whole
your grandma sues you, which is GDPR violation.
Yeah.
Damn you, grandma. Moving on.
But yeah, so definitely map out the experience and so that to your customer expectations. I have to actually give a credit to Cynthia Salas from Coursera, and she actually gave me the exact words, the customer expectation. And ever since she said that, I said, oh, that's a perfect way to talk about it. Like, what are they expecting, and how do you try and meet those expectations? I love
it's a good way to force yourself into empathy, right?
Yeah.
To think about the expectations. So third and final thing to do. What is it?
So I think the last thing is look at what you currently have. And I think find examples and audit. And this is something you can do over time too, because once you do these activities, you're probably going to be potentially re-architecting your customer experience or journey and making sure that it matches your customers' expectations, but always kind of audit that, and I think the first thing, even before you start mapping out, if you just want to know what's happening now, do an audit, to create a few test leads from different sources, or look into a few leads that came in from different sources recently. What path did they go on? Like, what are the things that happened to them? Map that out. And that'll give you really good guidance into maybe, oh shoot, I didn't know there was all these emails hitting this person, or I didn't know that, actually they, these people aren't being emailed at all. That could be happening too, just based on how you segment out your database the right way. So
and I think creating test leads is good. I've even seen people go so far as creating like a few different accounts, adding creating filling out a form here, filling out the demo form, like doing like different things, and then just seeing what happens. It's good to have them in different inboxes, because then you can actually see like what's happened to that individual, as opposed to maybe doing all the test leads with like a plus test and then everything coming into your inbox. Both ways are fine, but the other way, you could just go every week, you just go into that inbox and just see what's happened. Obviously you're missing some of the sales calls and stuff like that, but so going the extra step to look at real leads and seeing what they got and when they got the call and all of that kind of stuff is an extra step as well.
Yeah. And if you have a product-led focus, this is going to be a piece where you need to step out of your market automation platform, or if you don't have your sales engagement tool connected to, say, see the activities Marketo, you need to step there too. But look into the other systems. What's that journey there? Who are those audiences? If you feel like you can't, put yourself through the whole product experience because maybe it's too technical or whatever reason, meet with someone on the product side, like ask them, get some insight there. Really try and figure out what kind of channel you can get to get insight into that, because all of it makes sense.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people in marketing operations and marketing just say to me, I have no idea what's going on in Outreach or Salesloft, So like, if that's concerning, right? You could literally be sending a conflicting email at the exact same minute to someone.
Yeah. Yep. And there are simple fields that you can sync from the systems to actually give you that insight into who's being sequenced and how often and what step they're in. So just even incorporating that back into your own segmentation, I think can give you better insight. So there's a lot you can do there, but the main thing is do an audit, do it often. Maybe pick a certain cadence where if you make big changes to your customer experience, test it out. Does it make sense? Is there some type of friction that's happening, or is there something that doesn't really make sense to the prospect or customer? And how do we address that? The better it is, the better experience, the more impact on your revenue. And really at the end of the day, that's our main goal here. How do we create more revenue? How do we generate more? How do we close it? And all of this is the big key factor into all of that. So hopefully, I say this at the outset, hopefully that was useful, but I think that, for a lot of you, whether you're marketing ops, just the whole marketing team, I think this is an episode that you should definitely listen to, because I see it across the board. There's not someone that owns this. And so I think this can be definitely a conversation starter for your whole marketing team, or CMOs, if you're listening to this, conversation starter. How do we make this an initiative? And for 2021, I think you need to. So yeah, that's it. If anyone has any questions about this, feel free to ping me on LinkedIn, or both of us, or go to our website and chat with us there. But we'll see you next time on episode of Forward Thinking. Thanks.